Every story has four through lines: the main character, the obstacle character, the object of story, and the subject of story. Now, each of those four through lines has identical story points in it that represent the same different areas of concern as seen from each of these 4 points of view. Once again, just for a label, the main character is the audience position in the story and represents I, who I am, in the story mind. And the obstacle character represents you, an alternative outlook that the main character might adopt, but examines by looking at. I look at you. The objective story in the story mind is they. And in stories, this refers to all the other characters other than the main character, the obstacle character, the ones who are seen from the outside looking in, more objectively, by their function. This is what they do dramatically, by their function. Antagonist, protagonist. Antagonist and protagonist, for example, are archetypes, and they represent specific functions in the drama. The protagonist gets something going and tries to make something happen. The antagonist tries to prevent it or thwart it. Main character and obstacle character, in contrast, represent points of view. I'm looking from here, I'm looking at you. This is what they are doing. Subjective story represents we. It represents the relationship between the main and the obstacle as the two different outlooks covet out one another, try to put forth their best arguments, try to impact one another to change the other's point of view, to make the other accept one's point of view. So, I, you, we, and they, the 4 different through lines in the story. Really, 4 different points of view dealing with the same story issues, and that's why they all have the same story points. These story points are, first, a domain. I'll just put it down here in the middle, because it covers all of them. And underneath the domain is a concern. Now, before I go any farther, I'll show you how this ties into the Dramatica chart and is used for structure and story encoding. When you look at the structural chart, you'll notice that it has 4 different sections. I'm moving it up and down a little so you can see the 4 sections. It has an area at the top of each one of these 4 sections, 4 towers, that is as wide as the whole tower. And that gives the flavor of everything that falls beneath. Universe refers to a fixed state of things in the external environment. Physics to an activity in the external environment. Mind refers to a fixed state of mind in the internal environment. And psychology to a process or a manner of thinking in the internal environment. So we have external and internal states and processes in the Dramatica chart. It's a chart that's designed to be balanced, to look at everything in an equal weight. Before you do your storytelling and give things more emphasis, this gives an equal weight. It's kind of a periodic table of story elements. And then to subdivide each category into smaller and smaller parts, so you can move down from the genre level appreciations to the concerns in the particular types of concerns that happen in the plot, to variations on the theme, to the particular problem elements that with which the characters must grapple. So it's a way of zeroing in all the way through genre, plot, theme, to character, and getting more refined in the nature of the subject matter that's being dealt with in the story. Not all of these items are story points. Some of them are just subjects that are touched upon. In a complete story, everything on this chart, all the way down to the bottom, will be touched upon at one time or another. Let me move you a little closer just to show you at the bottom of the chart there's 64 elements. And each of those 64 elements needs to be touched on to tell the story completely. And each one has a different name. Look at that. So that's a lot of stuff, as you can see, that needs to be explored in a complete story. But much of it is just touched on briefly. It's just, this is how you get from A to Z, is by going through these things in the middle. Some of them, however, are nexus points, pivot points, as it were, where all the other things seem to revolve around them. And each level may have one or more pivot points. Those pivot points are the story points. It's the intersecting point of the dynamics for a number of other issues that come up. All of them in some way touch on a story point. So there's a number of story points in Dramatica that appear at these different levels. And at the top level here, we've already listed the domain and the concern. We're going to list them all, and then I'm going to go back and tell you exactly what they mean and how one story point differs from another. But each of these 4 through lines, each through line will be in a different one of these. Which one you put it in changes the nature of what is explored by the main character or in the objective story. Because if you put main character in universe, main character will explore these kinds of issues. If you put objective story in universe, the objective story will explore these kinds of issues. But let's list all of the different story points that are common to each one of these 4 domains, and then see what they really mean in terms of what kind of a nexus point or pivot point they are in the dramatic structure. Then, in the second half of this class, we're going to look at a number of video examples from the motion picture The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. And we're going to show you how a lot of these story points were actually illustrated, how a really good job of turning these into real people, places, and things, being consistent with the underlying structural elements in the symbols that were used to express them, how that works in something that's very well done. Okay, so we start with the domain, we have the concern, and underneath we have the issue. Issue used to be called range. It's the thematic topic at the heart of each of the 4 through lines. We have domain and range. Those are math terms. We wanted to make it a little friendlier, so we had domain, concern, and then the issue within that concern. It makes it a little easier to understand. These go down the first 3 levels of the chart we saw, and in the 4th level, we end up with a problem. So every single one of these 4 through lines will have a domain at the top level, a concern in the plot at the 2nd level. Underneath that plot concern, a specific thematic issue at the 3rd level, and within that issue, a particular character problem at the bottom level, problem element.